long. The title of this talk that was given to you is Psychopharmacology, and I'm definitely going to talk about psychopharmacology, but what I'm really going to talk about, because I believe that we have to integrate psychopharmacology and how we expand professional practice in general. So I'm going to talk about psychopharmacology in the context of the expansion of the scope of practice for clinical psychology, and where I really think we are going as a profession, and where I hope we are training you as students to acquire these skills to keep up with what I think are some fairly rapid developments in the profession of clinical psychology. I'm going to talk basically about three major contributions where I think psychological science has affected and continues to affect not only mental health practice in general in this country and around the world, but increasingly our involvement in the public policy process. So psychopharmacology is one such thing, and when psychologists became involved in this in about 1990 or thereabouts, and I'll give you a little bit of that history, we really became a player in the public policy process in a way that had not been the case for the profession in the past. If you go back and you look at the history of psychology involvement in public process, it's actually a fairly robust thing. At various points in our history, the contributions of psychological science have been more highly valued by the public than at other times. Anybody think of instances? They're usually not very fortunate instances. Often around the time of war, for example. So in the First World War, there was a great deal of psychological involvement and application of psychological science to doing what? Anybody remember? From tests and measures. The Army Alpha and Army Beta tests, which were designed to assess recruits' aptitudes. And that had a great deal to do with the screening selection process of people into the military. World War I, around the time of World War II, again, there was a great deal of involvement of psychology in screening people in and out of the selection process for the military. And then what happened is after Vietnam, we started to get involved in treatment and clinical and more clinical measures. After the Second World War, in the Veterans Administration's facilities, that's really where clinical psychology in the U.S. got its legs underneath it. But after Vietnam, we started to become more involved in direct service provision of psychological service and other services directly to service members in the combat environment. That's a different lecture, and I'd be happy to give it to you. But that is one example of how we've been involved. And since about 1990, as I said, our involvement in the issue of psychologists prescribing psychotropic medications has really had a fairly significant effect on public policy process, not only in individual states, but as we consider these things in larger environments such as the DoD, Department of Defense, and other large federal entities. How many states now allow psychologists to prescribe medication?
2.
I'm sorry?
2.
2, that's right. 2. The territory of Guam actually does. Nobody's doing it there yet. The state of Indiana actually has a provision to do that. Nobody's doing it in Indiana either. But now all of the Department of Defense does, and increasingly other federal sectors, such as the Indian Health Service, are allowing psychologists to prescribe. I also think we need to get involved in things other than direct provision of healthcare services. Public policy and using the example of large-scale climate change is another instance where I believe that the direct application of psychological principles to large-scale change will be of great benefit to the population at large as well as to policymakers. There's another good example of this. It's quite salient right now, today, in how psychologists are involved in setting national policy around large-scale change issues. Can anybody tell me what that might be? Pandemic illness. And if you go on to the web and look at the Department of Health and Human Services pandemic illness plan, one of the appendices, I think it's Appendix 12, is exclusively devoted to the psychological sequelae of pandemic illness and the kind of things that we can do to help ameliorate some of the effects of pandemic illness. Another big issue, and one that I hope that we're talking about more and more as we go through graduate education, is how we integrate psychological service delivery in contexts other than specialty mental health care. Okay? More and more people get their health care, mental health care, in publicly funded healthcare delivery systems such as federally qualified health centers. Not mental health centers, health centers. And the average, or the modal patient in a federally qualified health center is a woman of non-dominant ethnicity who is in her 40s with a family. She's often single, but about 60% of healthcare seekers in federally qualified health centers are non-dominant ethnicity females with some significant social challenges, economic challenges, and dealing with issues such as single motherhood. These people do not go to private practice mental health providers. They don't. They do not seek out specialty mental health care. They get their mental health care in a primary care delivery system. One of the things I think we absolutely have to do as educators and as clinicians is learn how to integrate our knowledge, learn how to apply psychological science in the public mental health, in the public health system, okay? So we are truly integrated into the primary care environment, and we become primary providers of behavioral health services. That's actually a radical shift from where we have been as a profession. I think it's a very welcome shift and one that's happening around us. So I think it's really important that we think about what is necessary to train students and to train practitioners to work in that environment.